Hello, everybody. Today, I am going to rank the NHL teams from 32, because I am including Seattle in this, which is why I'm wearing the shirt, to 1 in order of how much I like the teams. So this is completely objective, and there will be very slim reasoning behind any of them, except, yeah, I root for this team, or no, I usually hope this team does poorly. There will be some reasoning here and there, but overall, most of the reasoning will be pretty brief. But starting right into the video, at number 32, I have the New York Islanders. Uh, Islanders were like they fluctuated between 29 and 32 for a while. When they weren't that good. I'm a Rangers fan, so obviously they'd be near the bottom. And once they started adapting this very defensive, boring style of play, I started liking them less and less. And so, yeah. And then number 31 is the past 2 or 3 years are the first times that this isn't last on my list, is the New Jersey Devils. Now, the Devils, it's frankly, I'm a Rangers fan and I live in New Jersey. If you're in New Jersey, you're either a Devils fan or you hate the Devils. There's no in between. And overall, though, it's mostly just you gotta hate the team to have some fun banter with your friends when to talk about how their team sucks and your team's amazing. On to number 30, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins. And reasoning for them being so low, Rangers rival, and they keep winning. And I'm just tired of seeing them win. They've won enough cups already, and I want to see a few seasons of them being bad, but not getting good picks. And they have a history of they'll do phenomenal, and then they'll do terrible, get a Lemieux, get a Crosby, and then be amazing again. And I feel like that their downturn is coming. You can see their players like Crosby, Malkin, and Letang starting to decline, but the results are still there for the team. I really thought that this year they were going to fall. Going on to number 29, I have the Philadelphia Flyers. Philly fans in general aren't the nicest usually online. Uh, Generally, if I talk about my opinion about the team, about their team in any sort of negative way, their fans are usually the first ones to jump on me. And overall, though, there's not much that I really like on the team. Last year, they were higher, but this year, it's just been disappointing. And they're not a fun team to watch this year either. Unless if it's like that 9-0 Rangers win, then I loved watching that game. But other than that, it's just not really much other than they're a huge Rangers rival and their fans are kind of obnoxious sometimes. I gotta say though, there are good Flyers fans, and I love gritty. Moving on to number 28, I have the San Jose Sharks. So the first non-Metro team, and my big thing with them is they're always overrated every season. I even saw people going into this season saying that they would be a playoff team, and it made no sense. And then moves that they made in the offseason, they were pushing to be a playoff team, and like they traded for Devin Dubnyk, which didn't make any sense to me. And I'm a huge fan of younger teams, as you'll see as we get further down the list. And San Jose is one of those teams that reminds me of Detroit when they were on that really long playoff streak, or Minnesota fairly recently, that just keep trying to make the playoffs and they're mediocre. And their players are overrated too. Mainly Erik Karlsson, who in his prime was arguably the best defenseman in the NHL, but he hasn't been that for a while, and people kept putting him at that level. He wasn't even at that level when he was traded to San Jose. and everyone was acting like he was. Moving on to number 27, I have the Nashville Predators. Nashville's very similar to them. It's mainly just because they're an older team, and I don't have as much hate for them because I don't really think that they're that overrated usually. There's a tiny bit of that sometimes, but they also have some players that I really like on that team. I like Yossi, I like Ellis, Ekholm. Forwards are but one player that does drop them down on the list is Matt Duchene, who, since their acquisition of him, I've been saying he's overrated. And he's one of those players that I don't really like that much, so when I don't really have a strong opinion about a team, except they're not younger, so I don't like that much, and they have a player that I'm not a huge fan of, it will drop them down the list. Most teams I am pretty neutral on, except the Islanders, though, unless if I really like them. Moving on to number 26, I have the Vegas Golden Knights. Okay, can't talk about them being overrated because they're a phenomenal team. And their players are all phenomenal. I can't even say that any of their players are overrated. I'm tired of seeing them being good, though. They're the only team in the NHL that you can't say know what suffering is. And they need to have a season that they're just terrible. And honestly, if they have one season that they're terrible, they will climb up the list really high. But a lot of the times you can see their fans online and they're very entitled and they know how good they are. And it's just very annoying sometimes. And a lot of the things that I also find annoying with them is like when they were saying how much better Fleury was than Lehner after last season. Even though, yes, this season Fleury basically drank from the fountain of youth, Lehner was the better goalie last year. A lot of the fans of that team are very hung up on that first season team and hate when any of them leave. But I understand why. But if they're bad for a little while and the culture changes for they're like, wait, we can actually be bad sometimes and get that little wake up call, I think that I'll like them a lot more because they used to be really high on the list when I first entered the league. Number 25 now is the Columbus Blue Jackets. And I don't really have a strong opinion on them. Mainly they're low because it's a Rangers rival. And going back to that pushing for a playoffs when you're kind of not there, they kind of follow that too. And when they made those moves to pick up Matt Duchene, pick up Ryan Dzingel, and went all in and then swept the Tampa Bay Lightning, it was an amazing story. But it was still you knew this team wasn't going to win the cup. And it was one of those where you look at their management and you have to, and at least myself has to think, the team could be younger and possibly better now if they don't do that. And it's just frustrating. Next up, number 24, the Montreal Canadiens. Montreal, it's again mainly the overrated part, I think. This season they are doing very well, but I don't think that they'd be this good in the Atlantic Division. I feel like that the North is one of the weaker divisions in the league. And while they're number 4 right now in the division, I do think that if, say, Calgary started with their different coach, they might be number 5 right now. And even now, a lot of people think of them as a top team in the North, and I really just don't see that. And it's again about that one player who's overrated that could drop them, Carey Price. People still seem hung up on Carey Price being the best goalie in the NHL when he's not even close to there anymore. He's being heavily outplayed by Jake Allen this season, and it's not even close. On to number 23. We're into teams that I actually like now. I don't love these teams by any extent, but if I see them have a game, I won't be upset if I see them win. It's the Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago I like their young players. I get a little bit against Kirby Doc, though, only because of people saying he's better than Kako when so far it's been close with them. But it's a little too early to say that, and everyone is acting like he's miles ahead of him when it's really not that far. Um, they've got some older players, but overall their team's very young, and they've had a very good surprising season this year. And overall, though, it's a young, fun team to watch, but I think that the reason that they're so low is they're proving me wrong from my previews when I had them last in the NHL. And I'm a little salty about that. And and another huge reason, I'm not entirely over their dynasty. I think that they need a little more time of not being good, and then I'm fine with them winning again. But they're right about there. Last season, they were much lower on my list. I think they were around where San Jose is this year. Um, but the team got a lot more enjoyable to watch this year. Uh, moving on to number 22, the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Toronto is a young, fun team to watch. High offensive team, but it's a frustrating team to watch. There's no one on the team I dislike, but there's no one on the team that I particularly go, yes, I like him. If I get their jersey, I want him. Um, like even the Devils, if I were to get someone, I would probably get Butcher. No, I'd get Blackwood. There's no one on Toronto that I could really pinpoint and go, yes, I really like that player. So that drops them by not having one player that I can really go, I want them to do well. It's just frustrating to watch them. They'll always fail in the first round. Regular season, they do phenomenal, and it's one of those things where it's kind of like losing hope for them doing well. And they're also like, their fans are not the best. But like I was saying, though, their fans aren't the best, and every year they're talking about being a top team in the league. And while it usually does seem like that, they always fall short. But their fans talk a huge game all the time, and it's also they have one of the biggest fan bases. So seeing that constantly is annoying. And the big thing is though the media's constant coverage of Toronto, Toronto, Toronto. And I understand why, but it just gets really annoying. Moving on to number 21, the Washington Capitals. I wouldn't mind seeing them win another cup this year. Get Ovi another one. I was rooting for them against Vegas when they did win the cup. And they're one of the few Metro teams that I can look at and go, I like them. There's no player on the team that I dislike. Even Tom Wilson, I is one of those players I admit I hate him because we're playing against him. If he was on the Rangers, I'd be really happy. But overall, though, like, they're a rivalry, so I can't really have them high because I'm not rooting for them game in and game out. If they play the Rangers 8 times this year, so there's 8 times a year that I'm definitely rooting against them. And I'll probably root against them when they play Buffalo. So that's 16, and that's a pretty big portion. So I can't really have them much higher. And again, there's not really a player that stands out as I really like that guy, except for Carl Hagelin. But it's a fourth liner, and I know he's not that great. It's really just the Rangers nostalgia there. If they had Lundqvist, though, they would be much higher, probably in the low teens instead of at 21. Moving on, though, to number 20, Florida Panthers. Oh, Florida was down there last year. They were very low on my list. I thought they were a very boring team to watch. They've done what what I've always hated that teams do when they throw huge money at goalies in free agency, and they give Bobrovsky that terrible contract that they already wish that they didn't give him. But they're too fun to watch to have lower. Yes, Bobrovsky kind of brings down their thing a bit, but he's their backup goalie now. And honestly, if he's not playing, I really can't root against them usually. And I love Dreiger. I love Barkov, Huberdeau, Hornquist, and especially Keith Yandel. I want to see his Iron Man streak break the NHL record, which is looking like it's probably going to, knock on wood. But it's a fun team to watch, and exceeding expectations, while it is proving me wrong, which I hate, it's just entertaining to see them prove me wrong, unlike some other teams. And it's really great to see them finally doing well. I think that's also another thing with them. Why with them it's exceeding expectations instead of proving me wrong for them. It's been so long that they've been bad. And I kept pushing for them. I think they're going to do well. I think they're going to do well, and then collapse. It's great to see them finally doing well this year. Hopefully it's sustainable. Moving on, though, to number 19, the Buffalo Sabres. No question, they would have been higher a year ago. And they would have been higher because it's a team that hasn't done well in a long time, and I want to see them do well. It's so hard to root for them, though. They are so bad other than Ullmark. And yes, they have Eichel, and yes, they have Dahlin, and I do think Dahlin is starting to get underrated. But with how bad the team has been, it's one of those teams that I go to put on their game, and it's just boring because it's like I already know the outcome. Don't you bring up that Ranger game today. But it's one of those teams that it just seems hopeless, and like management is running around without their heads, just trying to get any semblance of something to work. And I like Jeff Skinner, I like Dahlin, I like Eichel, but I don't want the Rangers to get him. I think it will cost them too much. And I really like Ullmark. They have everything that I would want on a team that I can root for, but they can't be this bad. And even if they were bad, but not this bad, they'd be much higher on my list. But it's watching them and just being so frustrated every time I watch. Moving on to number 18, Los Angeles Kings. They could be higher, but there are two things holding them back. Number one, their cup wins in 2012 and 2014. That pushes them back because they had success recently. Don't really want to see them have much success yet. Number two is the cup win in 2014. They beat my favorite team in the Stanley Cup Finals. Of course, I'm going to have a little bit of hate towards them. But honestly, they're getting younger, and it's not the same team as it was back then. And I think that's a big thing. If you move out Carter, Quick, and all those other players that were there for that cup run, I think that I'm fine with them and that they would be higher on the list. And I love seeing the team get younger. I love Velarde. I love Kempe. I love Iafallo. If they get that blue line younger and they get rid of that old core that beat the Rangers, I will really like this team and will kind of hope for them to succeed. Moving on to number 17, Ottawa. They were definitely lower a few seasons ago when they seemed like they were running around without their heads. Back when there was all that controversy with Ottawa, but they seem to have it coming together now. Their prospects are coming up, and their players and players want to come to Ottawa. It seems they had actually a couple of really good free agent signings last offseason, and overall, it's a young, fun team to watch, and Matt Murray brings down their stock because I've never been a fan of Murray. But if this team could, say, next season, surprise people and make the playoffs, I'd find myself hard-pressed to root against them unless if it's against a team I like better. But overall, though, I really like what I see with that team. Moving on to number 16, Colorado Avalanche. So this is the focal center point of this, the halfway mark. My problems with them mainly stem from I thought they were overrated last year. I can't really complain about much this year, though. I love McKinnon, and Ryan Graves is so underrated. I still say he's the most underrated player in the NHL. They're a fun, entertaining team to watch, and they're probably just this high because they're a front runner. And who likes rooting for front runners? Moving on to number 15, the Dallas Stars. I'm shocked to add them this high. I'm not going to lie. Because they're a team that's underachieving. They're an older team. And usually those combined, and they're mainly defensive. And all that combined, usually I don't love that much. But Guryanov and Hintz automatically boost his team up so much. And Heiskanen, I love Heiskanen too. And these younger players that are jumping in now and playing prominent roles, especially with Sagan and Ben out, they're making me really like this team. And I really hope that they can push for that fourth playoff spot in the division. Moving on to number 14, Minnesota Wild. A little salty about Kaprizov being better than Lafreniere, but I kind of expected it with him being 24, Lafreniere being 19. Other than that, love Zuccarello. Talbot's proving me right with me thinking he was underrated, and I love Kakkonen. And their blue line is phenomenal, very underrated. And overall, they're a very underrated team, and they are pretty entertaining to watch. Moving on to number 13, with no players, so I can't really say it's the players or anything. Nope, they got nothing. I just like the team name, and I like the idea of rooting for a new expansion team that hopefully won't be as good as Vegas, though. The Seattle Kraken. Unfortunately, I don't have a hockey card for Seattle, but I think you can understand why. That's really all I can really say about them, though, because they got nothing. Moving on to number 12, the Edmonton Oilers. I've always been an Oilers fan. They have slowly fallen down the list as they've underachieved. They're slowly climbing back up as they are proving to actually be a good team now. I want to see McDavid and Draisaitl win. And I'm a huge Ryan Nugent-Hopkins fan. I'm not going to lie, though. If Nugent-Hopkins leaves, they will drop. But I don't think that they'll drop that much because Yamamoto's kind of taken over. Can take over that spot where I really like Nugent-Hopkins. So it'll be a very small drop, maybe just behind Minnesota or something. But they're a young team. They're entertaining. They got star power. It's frustrating watching them run without depth, though. That's my only complaint about them, especially in net. If they had a young goalie in net that could win them some games, I think I would like them a lot more. Moving on to number 11, the Boston Bruins. Very weird to see a Rangers fan that actually likes the Bruins. I know. But they're a young team, and I love the jerseys. I love the city of Boston, honestly. And McAvoy is really great. Pasternak's amazing. I love DeBrusk. There's really not much that I really dislike about this team. Even Marchand, I've got to admit, he's one hell of a player. And overall, it's just an entertaining team to watch game in and game out. Right now, though, I'm not rooting for them in a single game because I want the Rangers to take their playoff spot. But I will fully admit, in the East, if they make the playoffs, I'm rooting for them to win the East. Next up, on number 10, now we're in my top 10, the Vancouver Canucks. Absolutely would have been higher last year. I am a huge Jacob Markstrom fan, so losing him dropped them. I'm not a big Holtby fan, so gaining him dropped them. But I am a huge Demko fan. And if Demko was their backup this year, they probably would have been behind Seattle. But the fact that Demko is their starter, and they have a lot of players that I really like Brock Besser and Brock Besser and JT Miller. It's really entertaining to watch them. Only complaints are they do have some players that I'm not huge fans of. Edler's a little old for me, but I still really like his game. And Pedersen, I think, is overrated at times, but overall, he is a superstar. There's no denying that. But putting him on the same level as McDavid, like I've seen people do before, is way overrating him. Moving on, though, speaking about Jacob Markstrom, number 9 is the Calgary Flames. If they were good, they would be much higher. I was really rooting for the Flames this season, and I thought that they had everything in place to win the cup, and it's just not there. I don't know if it's the coaching. I don't know if it's just the players not gelling, if it's their stars just declining like Giordano, or what it is. Because I really thought last year they're one of the best teams in the league. All they're missing is a goalie. And then they get Markstrom, who in my opinion is one of the best goalies in the NHL. Markstrom's playing great, but the team isn't. So they're frustrating in that sense. But I love Markstrom. I love Mangiapane. I love Gaudreau. I love Kachuk. There are so many players on that team that I really like, that this little bit of frustration for this season, it still keeps them up at a top 10 spot. But if they don't do well next year, I really don't see myself having them this high anymore. But I really think next year they'll bounce back. Moving on to number 8, the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit is a very young team, and they have one player that kind of breaks my I like younger players rule. It's Mark Stahl. And I know that comes as a shock. A lot of Ranger fans really hated Mark Stahl, but I really think he was underrated. He was a very solid two-way defensive defenseman, and he got a bad rap for his contract, and it's as simple as that. He was a very solid bottom pairing defenseman, and I really liked his game. He was always a hard-working player, and he's a veteran leader that you want on your team. On top of that, I am a humongous Dylan Larkin fan. My number one aspect of hockey that I love to watch is fast players, and you're not going to find much faster than him other than McDavid. And sorry about that. And they're a young, up-and-coming team. Yzerman is arguably one of my favorite GMs in the NHL. And you could just see the pieces falling into place, and every game the team is getting better. And they're starting to win games that they're not supposed to. And within 2 years, they could be back in the playoffs, I think. And players like Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond, I love both of them, and they can make huge impacts by then. It'll be very entertaining to watch. Moving on to number 7, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa has a very small window for me to be big fans of them still. I would love to see them repeat, honestly. And they are a front runner. Sorry about that. They're a front runner, and they're a little bit of an older team. So what do I like about them? Vasilevsky, Point, Kucherov, Stamkos, McDonough. I could keep going on listing players. They're just a fun team to watch, and I can't help but rooting for them, especially when they keep taking old Ranger players and putting them on the team. I mean, it's basically the Rangers, but in the South now. And it's just so hard not to root for them. And it's again another team that has an older player that I have always rooted for, in Curtis McElhinney. And I just really hope to see this team have more success other than just that one cup. Moving on to number 6. My top 6 almost never changes. I think I had Calgary in there in the off season, but other than that, this top 6 doesn't change. And now number 6 is the St. Louis Blues. I was very happy to see the Blues win the cup in 2019, and they are starting to get to that phase where it's okay. You had your success, and now you're kind of fizzling away, and I'm not liking you as much. But they're still one of my top teams, and I don't think that they'll ever drop from being one of my top teams. It's frustrating to see them not have that much success this year, when if you looked at the divisions in the offseason, there's a clear top 3 in the division, and they were one of them. And then now it's looking like that they might not even be a playoff team. Arizona might take that spot at number 4. So they're starting to be a bit frustrating to watch and a bit frustrating to root for. Also took a big dive when they lost Pietrangelo. But overall, though, I still love the team. I love Oscar Sundqvist. I love Jordan Binnington, Tarasenko, O'Reilly. It's just it's a really entertaining team. Number 5 on the list, the Arizona Coyotes. They were number 2 for a while. And then the Mitchell Miller situation happened. And that really dropped them. They weren't number 2 by the time the Mitchell Miller situation happened, though, because I'm not a huge Phil Kessel fan, and they picked him up. And them underachieving what I expected last season. Also, they got Antti Raanta. Losing Derek Stepan also dropped them. But having Antti Raanta and a bunch of other, honestly, I think really underrated players on the team, it really makes the team entertaining because you want to see them do good to prove other people wrong. And it's one of those teams that if they did well and proved me wrong, I wouldn't care, because everyone would be proven wrong. Moving on to number 4 is the Anaheim Ducks. John Gibson. In my opinion, he is still the best goalie in the NHL, and he has no defense. And this was another season of first month or so of the season. Gibson deserves the Vezina, this, that, and everything. And then those talks fizzle out when his team gets bad and he can't carry them on his back every night again. And it's a little frustrating to watch that happen. But they're a young team. I love Max Jones, Sam Steele, Troy Terry. Trevor Zegras is going to be a star. Same with Jamie Drysdale. It's just a fun... they just have a nice, young, fun crop of players coming up. And as of right now, they're not a fun team to watch. I'll fully admit that. But I always look at their scores and be like, please, I'd love to see Anaheim get a win here, no matter who they're playing against in their division. And honestly, it's just one of those teams that I just really want to see do well. Moving on to number 3, we are in the top 3 now. And this is another level above that the last couple I've done. This is the Carolina Hurricanes. I don't know why. They are not affected by the division rival thing. Not gonna lie though, they would probably be about number 6 if the Rangers didn't get Lafreniere in the expansion draft. I mean, in the draft last year. Because they embarrassed the Rangers in the playoffs. But I really love watching Carolina play. And the big thing that's been holding them back for years for being up at this top 3 range is their lack of goaltending and management seemingly just ignoring the issue. And it was just frustrating seeing them ignoring the one big glaring issue on the team. And actually, for the past couple seasons, I've been really wanting them to call up Nedeljkovic. And they finally did it this year. It took Mrazek getting hurt, but Nedeljkovic finally got the call up. And he has been doing phenomenal. And he took the starter job from Reimer while Mrazek's hurt. I hope that he still has the starter job when Mrazek comes back, because if they go into the playoffs with Mrazek versus Nedeljkovic, I think it can be a completely different story. I think if they go with Nedeljkovic, they can win the cup. And it's a young team, fun team to watch. I love Aho, Svechnikov, Slavin, Hamilton, Pesci, Shea. There's so many different players on the team that I like. And they finally fixed their one glaring issue that was so frustrating to see management ignore. Number 2, it just 2 words sums up why this team is number 2. Blake Wheeler. And that's the Winnipeg Jets. They were lower when they had Cody Eakin on the team because I really don't like him. Which is another reason why Buffalo was lower. But overall, though, I really, really like everyone on the team. I love Scheifele, Connor, Wheeler, obviously, and Pionk, Hellebuck. And there's not a single player on that team that I don't root for. And Blake Wheeler especially, I really feel like that he's a generational playmaker and that he is one of the more underrated players in the NHL. As of right now, he's definitely on the downslope of his career because he's older. But when he leaves, I don't think that they'll be top 2. I really think that they'll drop down to like 4. And it definitely won't be the same team without Blake Wheeler. And I really, really badly want to see them win a cup with Wheeler. And if they can do that, the team will have so much more respect for me. I really think he's the best leader the best captain in the NHL, and a generational playmaker. And now moving on to number 1 in a huge twist nobody would have expected. I have the New York Rangers. What else can I say? I grew up a Ranger fan my entire life. Rangers. I could pull out about 10 Rangers jerseys and about another 20 shirts. And I just love the team. And the team is getting more and more fun to watch every single game. Especially, I love Vitaly. I've been really looking forward to Kravtsov for years, and he finally got his NHL debut last night. And just the team is being more and more fun to watch every single game. And they're a young team, and they're offensive team, defense, and with actually really good defense this year, and their goaltending is really good as long as Georgiev could get his game back together, but I really think it's just a little downslope for him. But honestly, I can't really say anything else except I grew up loving this team, and nothing will ever change that I'm a Rangers fan. Well, thank you so much for watching the video. And leave comments of what your either your top 10 or your top 32 favorite teams are. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.